So we're learning a lot about Alzheimer's, and it's very important, I think, to say we have learned a lot and we have a lot more to learn about normal aging. What is normal aging? We'd like to understand that better. That's just a good starting point. But I said earlier, there are now 4 drug treatments approved for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease, where in the late 80s there were none. And these, again, are symptomatic treatments. They're not disease-modifying treatments, but it's something where there was nothing. So that's something. We have had for, 15, 20 years now, the amyloid hypothesis. We know that 2 of the fundamental proteins implicated in Alzheimer's disease are beta amyloid and tau. We know that Alzheimer in 1906 was treating a woman who died in her 40s, and at autopsy there were new tissue stains. He stained her brain tissue at autopsy and found these neuritic plaques and neurofibrillary tangles. And still today, the amyloid plaques and the tau tangles are the fundamental pathologic hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. Now, about 8, 9 years ago, we developed the ability for the first time to image amyloid in a living person. So we can see this abnormal aggregation of amyloid into these plaques in a person who's still healthy, cognitively doing all right. Right now, in 2016, we are just on the cusp of being able to routinely image tau. This is new. We're just getting there, but there are studies underway that are allowing us to see both amyloid and tau in people who are still working, picking up their dry cleaning, doing fine outwardly, right? They may have the pathology developing of Alzheimer's, and we know that by the time the dementia presents itself, the pathology has been developing for 15, 20 years prior to that. So you think about when you talk to families, when you talk to someone you know and say, well, gee, Dad has Alzheimer's disease. Well, when did that begin? What you're talking about is, when did the dementia present itself? When did you start to notice that he or she couldn't remember things, was having problems processing information, was the memory deficits were getting in the way of their ability to take care of themselves? That's what we think of as when it started, when the dementia started, but the pathology of Alzheimer's disease was starting 10 to 20 years prior to that. Now, when we get to the point, and we're on the cusp of this, I think, when we get to the point that we can see the pathology of Alzheimer's disease developing well in advance of the dementia being present, now we've got a different conversation. Now different things are possible. We've had many, many drugs that look promising in phase 2 that disappointed us profoundly in phase 3. And many scientists think the problem is, by necessity, you mount these studies too late in the progress of the disease. If you had a compound you wanted to test today, by definition, with whom would you test it? You try to find people who are diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in the earliest stages you could find them, but they're too sick probably. You want to try to find these people, again, who are possibly developing the plaques and tangles, but before the dementia is present, can we stop this from developing? Can we stop the pathology from advancing? And eventually, can we prevent the pathology from developing altogether? I think as we're successful against Alzheimer's disease, first and foremost, it will be in preventing it from developing. So I think we're in the beginnings of being able to imagine doing research, mounting clinical studies with people who have the pathology beginning of Alzheimer's, but none of the symptoms of dementia. That's an exciting new opportunity that's out there in the future, I think. The other thing is, quite honestly, it'll change public policy, it'll change advocacy. And I use the Reagan story all the time. By the time Reagan shared his diagnosis with the world, it was too late for him to be really active in doing something about this. Most of the people who participate in our advocacy, while there certainly are people with a diagnosis who are very active, and we appreciate their courage tremendously, most of the people on my board, for example, are people who had a family member with Alzheimer's. They've been touched by it, but not them personally. When you or I know our risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, we're going to be motivated in a way we're not motivated today.